Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we will start shortly.
Recording in progress.
Let's wait for 1 more minute. Okay, let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you from different regions globally. Welcome to the Early Career Researcher Workshop. So I'm Xiaoling Kang from Elsevier. Okay. So this workshop is brought by 3 speakers from Elsevier, myself and my colleagues, Sandra and Luis. So we will share from different perspectives. I'll do a brief opening and share with you how Elsevier supports SDG, leveraging our data and analytics capability. Then my colleague Sandra will introduce relevant journals from Elsevier and how to get published with us. Most but not least, the most of the time will be with Luis, our editor-in-chief for the flagship journal, One Earth. So everybody, you can feel free to ask questions in the process. Yeah. Okay, so let's first briefly introduce Elsevier. So as you know, Elsevier is a world-leading publisher for journals and books. We publish more than 2,600 journals, including the well-known branding like Cell and Lancet. There are also some new journals, some rising stars in the sustainable research, for example, One Earth, Jude, and many others. Elsevier is also an information solution provider. You should be quite familiar with some of the products shown on the right side. Science Direct, Scopus, Engineering Village, and many others. Actually, what you may not know, Elsevier is also a world leader in data processing and analytics. From 2015, Elsevier has released a series of reports analyzing the SDG research landscape. Some provide macro perspective, while some others focus on specific fields or topics. Today, I will briefly introduce some key findings from 2 reports. So all of these reports are available online for free. You can quickly search in the search engine like Google. The fundamental work we do before any analysis is to match research papers to each SDG. Based on this fundamental work, we can easily search, track, and analyze the SDG research and do benchmarking between institutions, countries, or regions. The first report I want to introduce is what we released last year, the power of data to advance the SDGs. Some key findings of the report include, in the past 5 years, there were over 4 million SDG research articles. The majority were related to SDG 3, good health and well-being. Most SDG research didn't consider sex or gender factors. And most of the research articles were from high and middle income countries. In the report, there are also analysis and benchmarking between countries and regions in terms of quantity and quality. Here, it shows the portion of each SDG research compared to the global research output of each country, each entity. So I will not go through all the details. You can take a further look in the full report, which you can find online. There are also analysis and benchmarking between countries and regions in terms of quantity and quality as well. So here is an interesting indicator, relative activity index. This indicator means if a country or region published more in particular SDG compared to the world average. From the radar map, we can see, for example, for China, the red one is actually China is most active in SDG 7. While for UK, the yellow one is very active in several areas, which is quite strong performance in SDG research. The second report I want to mention is a quite new report. It's related to SDG 7, and the report is was just released earlier today. And the name is Pathways to Net Zero, the Impact of Clean Energy Research, which is related to SDG 7, and China is quite strong in this area. In the last 20 years, research output in net zero energy is growing in terms of both quantity and the share of the global research. The green line, left-hand y-axis, is number of publications in net zero energy. The gray shaded area, the right-handed y-axis, is the share of net zero energy publications within global research. So you can see a faster growth. China actually is taking the lead. Here you can see the output by countries. The number next to the country and the region code, the second column, it indicates the ratio of net zero energy share divided by the overall share. So you can see actually in terms of intent of the research, China is quite strong. There's also big progress in international collaboration. Here you can see the light green line. It indicates the global average share of publications with the international collaboration for net zero energy publications during 2001 to 2010, which is at 31%. So it's 10 years ago. The international collaboration rate is 31%. But if we look at the most recent 10 years, the dark green line, the international collaboration rate already reached 39%. And the gray bar indicates the overall international collaboration share of each country and the region in the last 10 years. So due to time constraints, I can only share very limited findings from the reports. You can download the full text and find out more. Now, let me hand over to my colleague, Sandra. She will introduce relevant journals for SDG and climate research. She will also share how to get published on those journals. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Charlene. If you stop sharing, then I can share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. One moment. I'm trying to. Can you see my slides at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks, Charlene, and also good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. So my name is Sandra Broers, and I work in the Elsevier office in Amsterdam on journals in the field of climate and sustainability. And Charlene has been showing you how Elsevier supports the Sustainable Development Goals through performing data analysis and mapping research. And I'm delighted to give you a short introduction to relevant Elsevier titles that offers an outlet for research on climate change and Sustainable Development Goals. And I can imagine that for you as early career researchers and young scholars, it can be, and I understand that the number of journals and the variety of academic journals that are being offered is overwhelming, and that it can be difficult to choose the right journal to publish in. And I will therefore show you a selection of Elsevier journals focusing on the four main themes of four main tracks of this Global Youth Summit. And I will also provide some guidance on how you can select the most appropriate journals. An important theme in the forum is the interconnection between climate change and transportation. And the number of published articles on this theme within Elsevier titles is growing at a tremendous pace, and I think about 30% this year only. And about 20% of those articles is published open access. And Elsevier offers a wide variety of both niche journals, but also more broad scope journals in the field of transportation. A key title in this field is Transportation Research Part 4D, and which is focusing on the theme of transport and environment. And the transport research journals is a family of lots of journals from A to F, but Part D focuses mainly on transport and the environment. And it publishes papers on the environmental impact of transportation, policy responses to those impacts, and their implications for the design, the planning, and management of transportation systems. Another journal is Science of the Total Environment, which is a very large, more multidisciplinary journal that publishes research on, as the journal already mentioned, on all aspects of the environment. And a proportion of the articles published in these journals is on transportation, and mainly in relation, for example, to air quality and pollutants and atmospheric conditions. A more niche journal, and not so old, it launched in 2011, is Sustainable Cities and Society. And this journal publishes papers on the designing, understanding, and promoting environmentally sustainable and socially resilient cities. And the one theme the journal is interested in is on smart, clean, and healthy transportation systems and infrastructure. So moving on to the next main track in the summit is the energy and climate change. Also, this field is growing rapidly with about 25% only in Elsevier titles this year. And also about 20% of these journals, articles is being published open access. Elsevier has a very large portfolio of dealing with all aspects of energy, social sciences, for example, energy economics and policy, but also more technical journals focusing, for example, in all forms of renewable energy. And many of those journals publish papers related to climate and climate change. And in this slide, I would like to highlight 3 journals. The first one is Energy Policy, which addresses policy implications of energy supply and use from their economic, social, planning, and environmental aspects. And the journal currently has a call for papers open on renewable energy auctions and looking at the past, the present, and the future. And if you're interested in submitting to this special issue, then have a look at the journal homepage for more information. Another journal is Energy and Buildings, and which focuses on reducing the energy needs of a building and improving indoor environment quality. And this journal currently has 2 call for papers open. One is on climate neutral global building stock from design to end life. And the second one is emerging building technologies for climate change mitigation and energy conservation. So if you're interested in submitting, you can have a look at the journal homepage for more information. A more recent journal that was launched only last year is more niche journal, Energy and Climate Change. It is an interdisciplinary journal covering the intersection of energy and climate-related fields, with spanning the physical and social sciences, with the aim of identifying real solutions and strategies. And in August this year, the journal published an interesting special issue on net zero energy systems. And this special issue is available on our platform Science Direct. So if you move to the next theme, which is food and health, article growth is about 25%, and also around 25% is being published open access. Highlighting 3 open access journals here. First one is the Lancet Planetary Health, which is part of the larger Lancet family. And this journal seeks to be the preeminent journal for inquiry into sustainable human civilization in the Anthropocene. And this journal publishes papers broadly encompassing sustainable development and global environmental change. A new journal out here is Global Foods, and started last year. And this journal addresses the challenges of climate change and sustainability in food production. So because it's open access journal, a relatively new one, we're happy to waive the open access fee, so the article publication charge, until the end of this year. So if you submit before the end of this year to this journal, you don't have to pay to publish open access. And another new journal which was launched this year is the Journal of Climate Change and Health. And this is a medical journal that publishes articles related to acute and chronic climate-related disasters, migration and changing patterns of disease, and the impact of climate change on individuals and health systems. And also for this journal, we're waiving the open access article publication charge until the end of next month. So last theme is nature and biodiversity. So growing about 20% in Elsevier titles, and about 30% of the papers is being published open access. Would like to highlight 2 journals here in this field. One is Biological Conservation, which is an established journal, high impact journal, publishes articles spanning a diverse range of fields that contribute to the biological, the sociological, ethical, and economic dimensions of conservation. And a very new journal out is Climate Change Ecology. This is an open access journal. And this journal publishes on terrestrial, the marine, and freshwater ecological research, looking at ecosystem adaptations or responses to anthropogenic climate change. The 2 special issues being developed, one is on viruses and climate, and the other one on algae and climate. And we're also waiving the open access publication charge until September next year. So there is some time to submit if you want to profit from the free publication. So now this is just what I've shown, just a small collection of all the relevant journals that we publish related to climate change and sustainable development goals. And you probably think, well, there's so many journals out there, so how do I find the appropriate journal for my research? And in the next slides, I will give some guidance. So it's really important to select an appropriate journal so that your work will reach the intended audience. If your paper is outside the scope of a journal, it will likely be rejected by the editor straight away. Not even because of the quality of your work, but because the topic doesn't fit the journal or the scope of the journal. And it's also very important not to submit an article to more than one journal at a time. International ethics standards prohibit simultaneous submissions, and the editors will find out if you do that. So also remember that your supervisor, who is often also co-author on your paper and has co-responsibility for your work, can give you some guidance and help you into the right direction where to publish in, and also ask some senior colleagues for advice. What you can then do is shortlist a handful of candidates and investigate them a bit deeper. So does the topic of my paper match the journal's aims and scope? Check, for example, if the journal publishes only papers of global relevance or is also interested in regional studies. Does the journal accept only theoretical papers, or is it also interested in applied research? Does it only publish novel, high-impact content, or also sound science papers? And you would also need to check the types of articles a journal publishes. If it's some journals focus mainly on review articles, and others journals they have a wide range of article types. And then check the readership. So is the journal read within the communities you want to reach? One consideration for selecting a journal to submit to is maybe the impact factor. The impact factor tells you how many times recent paper in one journal are cited on average in a given year. So when considering where you should submit your work to, the impact factor can give you some guidance, but should not be the sole reason to submit to a journal. Do not just aim for the journal with the highest impact factor, but choose a journal that is at the appropriate level. So ensure you submit to a journal where you have a reasonable chance of being accepted. Also check if the journal is of good quality and can be trusted. So check if the journal is indexed in trusted databases such as Scopus and Web of Science. And you would like to, you have to decide in advance whether you would like to publish in an open access journal or hybrid journal, and check whether your organization will cover the article publication charge. On elsevier.com/open access/agreements, you will find a complete list of institutes who have reached a deal with Elsevier about open access. There's also a tip: if you still are not sure, you can also check, for example, your reference lists and see which journals are being cited in your reference list, and it can also may lead you directly to the right journals to publish in. Elsevier has also developed a journal finder tool. This tool uses smart technology and field of research specific vocabularies to match your paper to scientific journals. It's very simple. You have to enter the title of your paper and then enter your abstract and some keywords, and then select the field of research. Then press find journals, and then you will get a list of journals that might be relevant for your work. And you can also refine the scope of your search to get more relevant journals. For example, you can select between open access and subscription. You can also select the range of the journal impact, site score and impact factor. And you can also select the range of the review and publication time. So as early career researcher, you probably not only want to publish your articles in journals, but you also want to present your work at conferences. And Elsevier doesn't only publish journals, but we also organize about more than 50 conferences on a yearly basis. And these conferences are usually directly related to the journals we publish or are supported by the journals. And I would like to mention here two relevant ones. First one is on energy and climate transformation, which will be held next year in June at the University of Manchester in the UK. And you can see the topics here: energy and justice, energy in place, governance, demand, and low carbon transitions. And the second relevant conference is Urban Transitions, which will be held next year in November in Sitges in Spain. It has a wide variety, range of topics: cities, land use and transport, planning, environment and health, nature-based solutions, justice and equality, engagement and impact, and education. Check out the conference homepage and see how you can register for the conference or submit an abstract if you would like to. So the last slide I would like to show is a couple of links, or relevant links on reports and other websites. So the first one is the 2021 Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change, which has been published, I think, last week or so. And this is an international collaboration that independently monitors the health consequences of changing climates. And Charlene already mentioned the Net Zero report, which was launched today. And would like to mention the SDG Resource Center, which is a free interactive education platform curating content related to sustainability research. It houses articles, but also special issues, videos, interviews from science, but also from law and business. And all this is freely available. And last but not least, I would like to mention the Research Academy at Elsevier.com. So this is a platform which contains free e-learning modules that are developed by global experts. There are modules on career guidance, but also on how to write an article and how to select the right journal, but also on, for example, on becoming a peer reviewer. So I hope this information was useful, and I hopefully I've given you some ideas where you can publish in and how to select the right appropriate journal. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Sandra. Any question? You can put your question in the Q&A part. Yeah, so I think Sandra will stay for a while. Yeah, she can answer later. Now let's welcome Luis, the editor-in-chief for the journal One Earth.
Thank you, Charlene. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Lewis Collins. I'm the editor-in-chief of One Earth. This is Cell Press's flagship sustainability journal. We launched a couple of years ago now, back in 2019. to meet our growing demands. The Earth can't cope. We need to do something about this. There are roadmaps, there are plans, the Sustainable Development Goals. The Paris Agreement has set us a net zero plan for climate change. But the truth of the matter is that we're not on track. We're nowhere near on track to addressing these issues by 2030 or 2050. And one of the reasons we're not on track is because of a lack of science, a lack of knowledge, a lack of research. All of these things can help us address these problems. They can help us understand the connections between these issues, the synergies, the conflicts, and the potential co-benefits of solutions. Anyone here now on this call has the potential to play an incredibly important role in creating a better future. It's a fantastic opportunity in many ways. So where are we? Where are we now in terms of publishing? Well, historically, disciplines have acted quite separately in what we would call silos. Authors have been writing articles for their own community and publishing these articles in journals that are very discipline focused. But times are changing. The sustainability community is growing. We're seeing different disciplines come together and coalesce around shared challenges. They're charting new ways forward with new methods, new concepts, new techniques. This is an interdisciplinary community, and that's exactly what we need to address these challenges. So while this is a scary time to be alive, it's also a time full of great opportunities to do something better, to do something a bit more holistic. And this is really the motivation behind One Earth, to create a single platform to address these multiple challenges, a home for sustainability science, a journal that doesn't ask authors to choose an audience, doesn't ask an author to choose a climate audience or an energy audience or a food audience. It's one journal to bring communities together. At One Earth, we consider ourselves a journal that publishes across all environmental grand challenges. We publish natural science, social science, and applied science, and ideally papers that combine these aspects together. But the intention of the journal is more than that. It's not just a place to publish research articles, it's a place to stimulate ideas, and it's a place to spark collaboration. We publish across the full breadth of sustainability research in areas such as food security, water scarcity, land use change, environmental pollution, planetary health, climate change. Our scope is incredibly broad, intentionally, because all of these issues are connected. We do publish a number of research articles every month, but we want to try and do something more. We want to bring people together in a proactive way, and we want to communicate important topics to a broad audience. We essentially want to tell stories, which not all journals tend to do. This is why every single month in every issue of One Earth, we dedicate a large portion of our content to a specific theme, a specific topic. And the full-time editorial team work really hard to curate science in a way that makes sense, that communicates topics to a broad audience. Our curation begins with our covers. We work with independent artists as much as possible so that we're featuring unique artwork on our covers every single month. And this art relates to the topic. So this is an example here of the topic biodiversity conservation that we featured a few months ago. And this piece of art, this mosaic, was created in response to the IPBES inaugural reports in 2019. So how do we unpack these issues every month? How do we tell this story? We try to arrange our content in a way that makes sense. And every month it's communicated to registrants of One Earth via an electronic table of contents. Every issue begins with an editorial written by the editorial team. The editorial tries to weave the concepts within the issue together. It tries to tell a cohesive and coherent story and identifies the connections between the papers that we've commissioned for this issue. We invite a diverse number of different content types. One of them, Voices. This features very short opinion pieces from very different people within a community. It's really important with sustainability issues to understand different people's perspectives and different people's worldviews. We're all impacted differently by the sustainability challenges we face, and we all have different ideas on how to resolve these issues. We need to learn from one another, and Voices articles usually feature between 6 and 12 opinions every issue on a specific topic. We also invite more in-depth opinion pieces, commentaries, which are generally supported with some form of analysis. A commentary sets the scene for a challenge, tells a convincing story to alert the reader to the magnitude and the urgency of the challenge, and then either proposes an actionable solution or calls for action in a convincing and compelling way. We feature several of these every issue, again, to cover different aspects of the topic. So in the case of this issue on biodiversity conservation, we have one that's looking specifically at the post-2020 biodiversity framework. We have a piece from a member of an Indigenous community about how these issues are affecting this community and how we can learn from Indigenous knowledge. And then we have one that's a bit more scientific that looks at the specific indicators. We also, every month, have a conversation with a community leader to try and determine what the current thought processes are at the very top level. So in this case, we featured a Q&A with Elizabeth, who's the secretary of the Secretariat of the UN Convention on Biodiversity, to learn her thoughts, hopes, and aspirations for the ongoing COP15 on biodiversity conservation, which took place in China just very recently. We invite primers, which are educational pieces. These intend to write about a tool, a method, or a concept in a way that can be understood by any community. And this is the point of our entire issue, really. It's an issue that you can read, regardless of your background, regardless of your expertise. If you're working mainly in energy, or you're a material scientist but interested in sustainability, all of this content should be accessible in terms of the way it's written and the way you can digest it. We also commission deeper, more insightful pieces that evaluate the current progress in the field and propose well-structured, robust, novel, and actionable solutions. These are our perspectives and review articles. These are much longer, for example, several thousand words compared with our 2,000-word commentaries. And we also feature art within our pages as well as on our covers. The artists of the world are doing a fantastic job in communicating environmental issues to a broad audience in a way that science sometimes fails to do. Art can be much more emotive in communicating these challenges and these potential solutions. And one of the aspirations of One Earth is to bring the science in art communities closer together so we can communicate science through art more effectively and more broadly. When it comes to the articles, the mission isn't necessarily accomplished once they're published. And this is a point that I feel is really important to get across, particularly to early career researchers. Sometimes authors feel as soon as they have that accept letter, as soon as a paper appears in the journal, the job's done and you move on to the next task. Where in reality, the life of your paper has only just begun. One of the main reasons that we conduct scientific research on sustainability issues is to communicate broadly. It's to inform policy through science. We need to communicate science beyond our academic colleagues, to non-academic colleagues, to decision makers all over the world. But we understand that authors are busy. We understand that the next project is waiting. The next paper is on your desk, ready to finish. So we have a dedicated press team and we try to press release at least one paper from One Earth every month. Our press colleagues will reach out to authors to get quotes. They will write a compelling narrative about the paper, and then we'll communicate this to our partners and media outlets around the world. This can increase the chances of a paper being picked up by large outlets like the World Economic Forum, like Bloomberg, like the BBC, like The Guardian, like the New York Times. And in addition to this, we tweet every single paper that we publish. Every single article we publish, we promote on social media, and a select few will also promote through WeChats in more in-depth breakdowns of the paper. This is to try and help the papers go further. It's to try and help authors really achieve the goal of informing policy through science. You've spent a huge amount of effort and time on your papers, on your work. It's time to try and realize its full potential at the point of publication. And this is what we try to do with One Earth. Every issue of One Earth so far, this is all of them, has focused on one of these specific challenges and taken this very heavily curated approach. We've tried to tell a specific story every single month. We've touched on themes such as hunger, such as energy equality, ocean health, inclusive cities, extreme events, and many more. And there are many more stories yet to tell. And we'll probably revisit some of these. It's important to realize that One Earth, in many ways, is like any other journal. We publish research articles, but we want to be more than a repository for research. And so we dedicate a lot of our issues every single month to this storytelling approach. How do we identify these issues? Well, we usually look for timely world events. We look for emerging trends within the literature. We discuss with the community, with our advisory board members. And we try to keep our fingers on the pulse of sustainability science to see what new trends are emerging. If anybody has any questions about this, feel free to enter them into the Q&A now, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation. But now I'm going to move on to some hints and tips on how to publish in journals like One Earth. So I've been using this image in my presentations when I talk about this for many years now, back to my nature days. And it's meant to indicate, there's this concept that getting published is difficult. You have to dodge around all of these obstacles, all of these hurdles, and editors get in the way. We're gatekeepers rather than helpful collaborators. And I want to try and change that perception today, because at One Earth, we see publishing as a collaborative endeavor. It's not just a case of submit your paper and see what happens. We try to help where we can. But there are many things that you can do as an author to make the journey smoother, to make it more successful. My number one tip is always to take your time, prepare well, and consider where it is you really want to publish. Take your time and write the best paper you possibly can. We, at One Earth and at any high impact journal, are looking for conceptual novelty above all else when we decide to send a paper out to review. We are looking for the broader relevance of your work. You should try to avoid the temptation to quickly publish papers and instead try to take time to write a compelling piece that tells a compelling story, particularly if you're considering a high impact journal that has a broad audience. Don't just write your paper for yourself or for your supervisor or for your colleagues. Think bigger, think more broadly. Try and write your paper in a compelling way. In addition to novelty, we're looking for a significant advance in understanding or mechanistic insight. So it's not enough just to tell us how something's happened. We want to know why it happened and what relevance it has for the broader community. As Sandra has just said, carefully consider the right journal for your work. If you want to submit to the highest impact factor journal, by all means do, but it won't always end in a successful outcome, and it can delay publication of your paper. Have a look at the scope of the journal. Reach out to the editors if you want to find out if your paper is suitable, but carefully consider what the realistic venue for your work is. Be self-critical. Spend a lot of time going over your paper, rereading your paper, making sure it makes sense, making sure it works, making sure the story fits together in a cohesive way. You want to tell a very clear message. You know, the story should be very, very obvious to the reader. And it's important that you go beyond reporting the data, like I said. We want you to interpret the data. We want to see what novelty, what significance your paper provides. As editors, we tend to ask ourselves kind of three big questions. And I recommend that as an author, you ask yourself the same questions. So what? What's new? Who cares? Why is this paper or the subject you're writing about important in the context of, in the case of One Earth, environmental grand challenges? Now, what's the bigger picture? Why are you conducting this research? What's new? What are you providing that offers an advance over current understanding? Is your paper confirmatory, or is there something novel here? And also, who cares? Who are you writing your paper for? Who is the audience? When you're writing your paper, read through it. Maybe ask somebody outside of your immediate group to read through it and see if they learn something. Quite often, when writing papers, we see a paper that's written incredibly well for a narrow community, but hasn't explored that broader potential. There are many ways to write a paper, and there are many right ways to write a paper. And these tips really are what we feel works at One Earth, and I would suggest work at many other high-impact journals. With the introduction, it should be there to really orientate the reader. Tell the reader what that bigger challenge is. Tell the reader what the research question is that you feel needs to be urgently addressed, and convince them why. The introduction, in addition to providing that broad background, should make it very clear that there's a current gap, there's a knowledge gap, there is a question to be answered. It should convince the reader that this is an important question, that it's an urgent question, and that research is desperately needed. And you shouldn't just do this by making this claim. You should be citing the existing literature, the most relevant recent papers. Where is the field at the moment, and where does it need to go? This should be setting the stage for you to tell the reader how you take the field forward. And this should all be communicated in your introduction. When it comes to your results, present the results clearly and concisely. Some journals will ask you to have a method section ahead of the results. Higher impact journals tend to dissuade this. By all means, if it's important that the reader understands your method before they interpret your results, then provide a method summary at the beginning of your results. But we prefer that the majority of the methods come at the end of the paper. And there are a few reasons for this, but the biggest reason is because having the methods, a very technical section that early in the paper, breaks up the flow, and you'll lose interest from some readers. Some readers who don't understand the specific technicalities of your paper may lose interest. Whereas if you put this at the end of the paper, those that are interested and want to reproduce your results can refer to that. But those that are interested in the story you're telling can quickly move on to your results. It's really important, as I mentioned before, to analyze and interpret the results, to take your work that step further beyond reporting something. Yes, we're interested in the trends. Yes, we're interested in the correlations. Yes, we're interested in the relationships that your results uncover. But it's really important that you tie this together and you discuss it in the context of existing knowledge. So remember those questions that you raised in the introduction, those issues, those knowledge gaps that you brought to the reader's attention. In the discussion section after your results, this is where you tie up all those loose ends. This is where you convince the reader that you filled that gap with your research. Talk about existing papers, talk about their limitations, talk about how your work takes things one step further. And don't make promises early in the paper that you don't fulfill later. We see a great many papers that are submitted that promise to provide science that will completely change policy, and yet policy is never mentioned ever again in the paper. If your work has the potential to inform policy or change policy, then we expect a very thorough, a very robust and comprehensive discussion of how it can do that in the discussion section. Empty promises early on lead to disappointments later in the paper. Another key tip, I think, and I speak from experience when I was an author writing my own papers, is to be flexible. And what I mean by this is tell the story that your results support, not the story you wish they supported. And we've all been there where we have a research project and we went out with an intention to collect data, to answer a question. We all have a null hypothesis that we want to test. Sometimes the data gives you a different answer. Sometimes it doesn't match your expectations. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but tell the story that your data supports, not the story you wanted your data to support or you've had in your mind while conducting the research. Now you have the data, it's time to analyze it objectively. Sometimes you'll have great reviewers who will do all they can to help you improve your paper, which is what we look for in good reviewers at One Earth. And sometimes the editor at the journal would give your paper the benefit of the doubt if they see potential in your work, and they'll send it to review. But this doesn't always work. If the paper isn't particularly clear and it's not evident how your work advances the field, it won't be sent for peer review. The paper needs to convey very clearly what is new, what are you offering here? The editor then can recognize that, and reviewers will also recognize that. It's important to make this clear at the beginning. We try to give papers the benefit of the doubt, but we receive a high number of papers and we can't send every paper out for review. Think about the context of your work in terms of scale and frame it in the most appropriate way. Now, your paper for a high impact journal doesn't need to be at the global scale. It doesn't need to be covering every country in the world. It could be a local study. It could be locality specific. But tell the editor, tell the reviewer, tell the reader why that locality is important. If your paper is restricted regionally because of data limitations, it's not a very compelling story in terms of your experimental design. If you've identified an area to focus on because that's part of your experimental design, fantastic. Tell the reader why that's the case. For example, if you're writing a paper on cobalt mining and the impact it has on human rights, you're probably writing about the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it makes sense to have a paper focused on that area. If you're talking about global flows of nutrients and you only have 5 sites from India, it's not a global story and you shouldn't try and tell it that way. So be sensible about the scale, communicate to the reader why you've chosen that scale, justify your selection, and describe to what extent it's representative of other regions. Sometimes you'll have one region of the Earth that you choose because it's a perfect example of one mechanism. If you're going to claim your results can be applied to other regions elsewhere, then you really have to demonstrate this. Show the reader how your findings from this part of the world can relate to findings elsewhere. It's not enough to make the claim. The paper needs to demonstrate the claim. Finishing touches. When it comes to the end of your paper, you've written your paper, it's compelling, you've tied the introduction with the discussion, you've explained to the reader the advance that your work offers. It's now time to write your title, to write your abstract, your summary, and the other aspects that different journals ask for. Make sure you leave these things to the end. Don't write your title before you start your paper. Don't write your abstract before you start your paper, because it will change, almost certainly. When it comes to titles, different journals have different rules. At One Earth, we tend to dissuade questions, particularly for research articles. Now, the reason for this is because a question implies ambiguity. It implies uncertainty. It implies that a question hasn't been answered. Whereas really what your research article should have done is answer a question. So tell the reader what your paper has found. Tell the reader about your primary results in the title. Try not to pose questions. Try not to describe what the paper will try to do. Tell the reader what it does. The vast majority of people that interact with your paper will only ever read the title and the summary. Make sure they count. Make sure you hook the reader in with really compelling titles and really compelling summaries. That isn't to say you should oversell your work. Overselling is never a good idea because the proof is in the paper, and an editor that reads a compelling title and a compelling summary is going to read the rest of your paper. And if it disappoints, it won't be sent out for peer review. A well-structured summary can have a really, really powerful impact. And there are different ways to write summaries, and different journals have different requirements. At One Earth and at many other high-impact journals, we propose a very clear recipe for a summary for an abstract. We recommend that there's an opening statement that provides the broader context. What's the big picture? What's the environmental grand challenge that your work relates to? We then recommend a statement that's narrower, that identifies specifically the knowledge gap. What's the rationale for your research? Why is it needed? This should be followed by a here we statement, or in this paper, we, and it should present your primary result. It should briefly convey your approach and then present your primary finding. And it should make it clear how that finding fills that knowledge gap in the previous statement. And then you should end your summary by talking about the broader implications of your findings in the context of that broader statement in statement 1. This way, you're tying your summary together. It's a mini overview of your paper. It provides the research question, the result, and the significance, all in 150 words, or at One Earth, or sometimes more or less words elsewhere. Don't focus entirely on what your paper has shown without providing context. And similarly, don't just provide context without telling the reader what your paper has found. At One Earth, we also invite authors, or require authors for research articles, to write what we call a science for society statement. This is similar to your summary, but it shouldn't be the same. The point of the science for society statement, it gives you an opportunity to tell the broader audience, the non-expert, the non-academic, why your work is relevant to society. Why would a non-academic, a lay person even, a decision maker, a policy maker want to care about your work? How does it relate to people's lives? How does it relate to global decision making? It's an opportunity to tell your story in a slightly different way, in a non-academic way. Supplements are incredibly useful in all papers. Most journals allow you to have supplemental information, but it should be supplementary. It should be supporting information. Anything that's central to your main story should appear in the main text, and anything that's in the supplement should be cited in the main text at the relevant point throughout your paper. Most journals today also require that data is deposited in a publicly accessible repository. This is very important for reproducibility, and it's very important for having recognition and credit for the data that you've created, the data that you've provided. Most journals require this upon submission, so if the reviewers choose to do so, they can try and reproduce your findings. It's generally unacceptable now at most journals to not provide data. We understand there are sometimes some reasons. Sometimes there are issues to do with identifying information and you can't make that information available. Sometimes the data is owned by a third party, and we recognize this and we understand that. If that's the case, you should indicate this when you submit your paper. And really, even if you can't make the final data set publicly available, you should still make it available to the reviewers for the peer review process. Cover letters tend to divide people. Some people think they're a waste of time. Other people think they're incredibly important. I definitely fall into the latter camp. I think they're incredibly valuable for more than one reason. Firstly, it allows you to tell the story, tell your story in a way that is less scientific. And as an editor, I'm always really interested to hear why you're excited about your work. And why have you conducted your research? Why do you think it's suitable to be published in One Earth? It shouldn't just repeat the summary or the abstract. It should really explain to the reader, the editor, how your paper makes a difference. There's also an opportunity here to suggest reviewers or to exclude reviewers. Most submission systems now allow you to do that in a different entry when you submit your paper, but the cover letter can also be quite helpful for this. If you feel there are some great people out there that could review your paper, we're always open for suggestions. We will vet these people independently, but we're open for you to suggest them. But be sensible. Don't suggest your supervisor, don't suggest your co-authors or your long-term collaborators, because we will research this and we won't invite those people. You can also exclude reviewers if you want. We understand that there's competition in science. We don't want to have biased review. If you have a conflict with somebody, feel free to exclude them. But again, be sensible and limit this number. Someone has to review your paper. You can't exclude everybody. And I've seen some lengthy exclusion lists in my time. Another really important thing to include in the cover letter is an indication of any related papers that are currently under review elsewhere. As I said before, novelty is really important to editors. So we need to know what's out there that might compromise your paper. Also, if you're submitting a paper to us and your methods paper is under review at a different journal, we need to know that, and we need a copy of that paper so our reviewers can look at both of the papers together. So if you have a related paper that's under review elsewhere, let the author know, let the editor know, and ideally provide a copy with your submission. Sometimes it's unclear what happens to your paper when you hit submit. You've written the perfect paper, you've had somebody outside your group read it, you're happy that you're telling a compelling story for an interdisciplinary audience, you've made it clear what the advance is, you submit it to the journal. What happens next? It's not always entirely clear. It's fairly straightforward, nothing incredibly secretive. First time, as soon as it comes in, it undergoes a quality control check. So one of our editorial assistants will look at the paper, make sure the files are all in the correct format. And if you've selected double-blind peer review, which is an option that One Earth offers, where you can anonymize yourself to the reviewers, they'll do a quick check to see if your paper is actually anonymized. Sometimes people select this option but leave all of their identifying information in the paper. It's your responsibility to remove this information, and we'll do a quick check, and if it's still there, we'll send it back to you and we'll ask you to remove it. Once we're happy that everything's in order, the assistant sends this paper to the editor-in-chief, so me at One Earth, and then I will assign it to one of my team members, or I'll handle the paper myself. The editor will read the entire paper. They'll read the entire paper more than once. We don't make decisions based on the cover letter. We don't make decisions based on the title or the abstract. We read the entire paper. And when we read it in relation to the existing literature. So we see what else is out there. We have a look what you've worked on previously. We check your reference list to see what top papers you're citing. And we do this to determine what level of advance, what level of impact a paper will have. And when I say impact, I don't mean we try to decide how many times your paper will be cited in the future. We don't care about that. We care about societal impact. Does your work have an opportunity, have the potential to impact knowledge in this area? Will it make a significant impact on our understanding? This is what we're looking for. If we're satisfied, then we'll send it out for review. If we don't think it meets the editorial criteria, we will return the paper to you. Many papers don't make the criteria at One Earth. Many papers don't make the criteria at other high impact journals as well. We'll try and make a decision quickly, particularly if we're going to decline your paper, because we don't want you to lose time in publishing it. Again, it's important to be realistic about whether a journal is right for you. Sometimes it's worth taking a chance. If we don't feel it's right, we'll send it back to you. And in some cases, we'll try and suggest another journal within the portfolio. As I said, many papers don't make it to review. If we've had your paper for a while and you'd like an update, then just ask. Sometimes we're very busy. At One Earth at the moment, we're actually recruiting a replacement editor, so we're an editor down at the moment. Anyone out there today who's interested in editorial career, feel free to get in touch. So sometimes it can take longer. We haven't forgotten about your paper, but you can always ask. Asking us for an update isn't going to impact the decision that we end up making. If we're going to send your paper to review, we tend to send it to, I would say on average, 2 to 4 reviewers. But this differs across every single paper. Some papers are very straightforward, don't need a huge array of expertise, and can be reviewed by 2 independent experts. Some papers are incredibly complex and interdisciplinary, and we need a variety of expertise to provide us with that advice. Full-time professional editors at most high-impact journals are no longer practicing academics. It's been a long time since I was in the lab. We're not in a position to make technical decisions on papers. This is why we send papers for technical peer review. The assessment an editor makes at this type of journal is about novelty, is about significance. And the reason we're well placed to do this is because we read hundreds of papers a year. For every paper we read and assess, we read a dozen papers around it to determine where it fits within the literature. So we have a very broad view of the emerging trends, and that's how we can assess the novelty and potential significance of your paper. When it comes down to the technical methods, this is why we send papers for technical peer review. We try to make a decision post-peer review quickly, ideally within 1 to 2 months, but this, to a certain extent, is outside of our control. The pandemic, for example, has had a huge impact on reviewers' time. They have many other responsibilities, and they can't always return reviews in a timely manner. Again, if you're anxious about the decision, let us know, contact us, and we'll update you on the situation. But at the moment, the peer review process is taking a little bit longer. Sometimes people think it matters when they submit their paper. If I submit it on a Friday, it won't go out to review because the editor's already sent lots of papers out to review this month. That's not necessarily the case. It doesn't matter really when you submit your paper. We'll always give it the attention it deserves, but sometimes it's slower than others. If you submit your paper right before a major conference, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get reviewers to review your paper in a timely manner because they will all be at this conference, all preparing for this conference. So think about when you're going to submit your paper in terms of other events rather than the day of the week. We try to recruit diverse reviewer pools where we can. We don't want anybody that's in direct competition with you, but we want people that are close enough to the science so that they can give us an authoritative opinion. Sometimes we review people to have a big picture overview. Sometimes we recruit people to have a very technical, methodological review on your paper. The bottom line is, the majority of the time, you don't really know who the reviewer is as the author, and you should try not to make assumptions. Each reviewer has been asked to review a specific element of your paper. They don't always agree, and that's where editors come into play. We look at that advice, we compile it, and we identify whether they agree with our original decision to send your paper for review or whether something has come up that prevents us from considering the paper further. When we get the reviewer comments in, we then try and make a decision based on these comments. And there tend to be 4 types of decision. We might reject a paper because perhaps we sent it out to review thinking it was incredibly novel, and the reviewer identifies a compromising paper that means we can no longer consider it, a paper that scoops your novelty. Then we may reject the paper. The main reason for rejection is high technical concerns. So concerns about the robustness of the methodology, concerns about the extent to which the results support the conclusions, concerns about your experimental design. These are concerns that we feel can't be addressed unless the paper was completely rewritten. And if that's the case, we will probably decline publication. The majority of the time, we try to give authors a chance. If we feel there's potential to address the reviewer concerns and the potential of novelty and significance still holds, we will let you revise the paper, and we'll make a major or minor revisions decision based on the scale of the revisions that are needed. Major revisions, again, are usually related to the need for more data or more analyses, more modeling, more experiments. Minor revisions are generally related to the need for more discussion, more context, better storytelling. The other decision, of course, is the accept decision, the decision everybody wants. Hardly ever happens at the first round of review, particularly for sustainability science papers, because they're very complex. Interdisciplinary studies, there's lots of shades of grey in this area of research. There's no black and white necessarily. There's no clear-cut answer. And so papers usually require 2 rounds of peer review. So if your paper isn't immediately accepted, no, don't worry about that. There's an opportunity to revise the paper and strengthen it. And maybe it will be accepted next time. Quite like this cartoon. This is about revising your paper in response to the reviewer comments. It's been reviewed, the reviewers have given you feedback, and the vast majority of the time, reviewers' reports are intended to help you strengthen your paper. They're intended to help you write a better paper. Now, don't forget, these people have given up their time to review your paper for free. They've committed their own valuable time to read your research, and they're trying to understand it. Any feedback they give is incredibly valuable, and you should take that on board and try to incorporate into a revision. We ask all authors, when they provide their responses, to respond to every single comment and to respond in a very professional way. Try not to dodge comments that you don't think you can address. If you can't address them, and there's a valid reason for that, tell us why. If you've made a change in your paper, in your response to review a document, tell them what line this change has been made at. Include line numbers in your manuscript always. It makes peer review so much easier, and it allows you to show exactly where you've made that change in the paper. Better yet, include that change in your point-by-point response, so the reviewer can review your response very quickly and very efficiently. As I said, it's important that you're polite and professional when you're responding to the reviewer. These people are professionals within the community. They may be a future colleague. They may be a future employer. Please write point-by-point responses with a moderate tone. Sometimes it's difficult to dispassionately defend your work. Criticism is hard to take sometimes, and we recognize that. As editors, when your paper comes back in and your point-by-point response comes back in, we will review that. We will evaluate it. If we feel the tone has potential to be misinterpreted by the reviewer, we will send it back to you and ask you to revise it. This is in everybody's best interest, and it makes the review process move along much, much more smoothly. So that's it. I've come to the end of my slides. I hope that was very useful. As I've said, at One Earth, we try to consider the publication process as being a collaboration. Editors are really here to try and help you move through this process. We're not here as barriers preventing you to get to publication. We will be direct and we will be honest, and if we feel the paper does not meet our criteria, we will decline it for publication and we will try and suggest somewhere else. If we feel your paper has potential, we will do all we can to publish the paper because we're excited about the science as much as you are. Sometimes we get to a point and it's clear it isn't a great fit for the journal, and again, we may decline it. But we're really here to help. If you're unsure if your paper is a good fit for the journal, reach out to us, let us know, and we'll be happy to provide feedback if we have the capacity to do so. Again, I hope you found that interesting, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. So for participants online, do you have any question for Luis, Sandra, or me? Actually, I don't see any any questions in Q&A part. So it's already very, very late for researchers or students in China. It's already midnight. So anyway, we are trying to make this recording available to more researchers afterwards. So if there's no question, I think we can finish the workshop earlier. And yeah, we welcome questions, yeah, emails afterwards. Yeah. So thank you again for attending this event. Let's keep connect. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.